Hey, good morning. Got a little trouble this morning with my daughter's Jeep. Did a restore on this thing about 1.5 2 years ago. It's a pretty sweet little truck. Did a lot of cooling mods. Installed a aftermarket 3-row aluminum off of eBay. Did a block flush, cooler thermostat, new water pump. These have a history of kind of an overheating issue. So I tried to get it fixed before we put her on the road with it. But anyway, so I'm going to do a reinstall on another radiator, because this aftermarket radiator is leaking on both sides where the core right here meets the tank. I didn't realize it, and then we started getting an overheating issue. And then when I tore into it, I figured out that both the core to the tank's leaking. So I've got another one. Gonna try it, see what's up. So obviously I've started disassembly. So we're gonna take off the headlight doors, loosen these so we can get to the bolts. There's a nut on each side here, and then nuts all along the top of the core support that retain the header panel. And then the next thing we're gonna do is pull off the top core support center section, get down to the radiator and condenser and stuff, and we'll start getting down to the bottom of the radiator and get it cut loose. And I'll do another block flush, another thermostat change again, clean it all up, put another new radiator, and we'll see if we can't get it fixed. Here we go. So here we go. We're going to pull this off next. Real careful. Top of the core support bolt, the radiator and the mount. It's not all of them, but that's the majority of them. I've done this off next. Then we're down to the radiator, condenser, bolts, mounts that's got to be changed over, and then disconnect all my hoses, drain my fluid, and do a flush. Okay, so I've got all my transmission lines unhooked, all my water hoses, the bolts that retain it to the condenser. So it should just come straight up reasonably easy, kind of like this. So obviously, see where it's leaking right here, all along this side especially. And then I had to use a special tool, one of these, to disconnect the transmission line. So that's where it's at. Okay, now my next step was to flush the block. I just took a regular water hose sprayer. Here's my heater hoses. Flushed them back and forth, in and out. Cleared all the sludge out of the heater core. Stuck it in my thermostat inlet. Flushed it out, kept flushing it, till it got clear. That's the best I can do with what I got to work with here today. So we're going to start cleaning everything up, start back on the reassembly. So looking pretty good so far. Alright, I made a trip to the local auto parts store, got me some more coolant, a couple of new sets of hose clamps, where I had a couple of issues the last time. I noticed with some leakage around some hoses, the older hoses at the connection, so I'm going to change some of those original clamps. Prep my block and my thermostat housing with a roll lock wheel and an air die grinder. You can use you know, whatever. You just want it polished down to the metal, nice and clean. I used a little bit of this brake clean to clean the surface, mating surfaces. And then unfortunately they didn't have the thermostat that I wanted. But this one, you know, this is a really good name brand, 160 degree. It's only got like 5,000 miles since I did all this work, so we're going to go ahead and put this back in and do the reassembly on this thermostat housing, and then we'll be back into the radiator for the install. Okay, so I got my radiator all prepped, transmission lines, connectors in. I put a little bit of sealant around this drain cock, and just a tiny bit around the connections, just to make sure it doesn't have any issues with sealing. So what you're not familiar with, maybe, you know, on these aftermarket radiator installs, is there's going to be a little difference in shape and size and height and everything. So on this particular Jeep, what I ran into originally was the height was off. So once I put it in there, my upper core support did not want to fit right against my upper mounts to my radiator. So what I had to do was shim it with a little small stack of washers underneath my condenser that my radiator sits on top of, to bring my height up to where it's correct with the mounting surface of my core support. So I'm still, once I measured it against the old radiator, it's real close to the same. It's hard to tell from this radiator to the other one if there's a different manufacturer or not, but it seems there's a few things that are a little different, so that tells me that it might be different, but I'm not for certain about the manufacturer, if it's the same or different. So we'll do the install real quick. Actually a little better than the last one, because before on the other radiator, this upper mount where this condenser goes into, I had to actually kind of ream the hole. This one actually fits a little better than the previous radiator, so hopefully and it's going together a little better than the last time. Okay, I've got the radiator back in. Looks pretty good. All the shrouds are in. Water connections, hoses, all that are connected. Transmission lines, everything's good. One issue that I had with my previous radiator was the lower connection at my transmission line. So it would, because of the way the connection was made, it wouldn't stay on, so it would blow off with pressure eventually. So I zip tied my lower line to my hard line, both power steering and my transmission side, and that holds that connection right here tight, because it did blow off one time and lose a bunch of fluid. And then the other thing with this particular radiator, or the other one, was that the radiator cap is made a certain way where it'll bypass on pressure but will not suck coolant out of the coolant overflow bottle. So that's one thing that I noticed I had an issue on the last one. When it started overheating, there was no loss of coolant out of the reservoir back into it, so it stayed full, and I realized that I had an issue there also. So that's one thing on these radiators that you might notice they won't pull coolant out of your overflow back into your radiator to keep it at level. So that's an issue. So we'll put the upper core support back on, and we'll get it running, fired up, and get it warmed up, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I got it all warmed up, full of fluid. I checked it, and it's been running for about the last 10 or 15 minutes. So when I feel it, left the radiator cap off, obviously, and watch my coolant level. The next thing I want to do while it's running without getting my hands in the fan, I want to feel the upper radiator hose. On this old system, that will tell me when my thermostat is open and my fluid is passing through my radiator at that point. So once it gets hot, you know it's open, it's flowing coolant, and then it should run continuously with this off and never bubble out. So at that point, you know, we're good. I put the cap back on it, I'm full now. So I'm going to reinstall my header panel, headlights and all that stuff, and then the air cleaner last, because the wiring harness is attached to my header panel for my headlights, and I'll connect that after putting it on. There we have it. We're good to go. We're going to test drive it, see how it's doing. Got it all back together. Looks pretty good. Air cleaner, everything's in it, so it's ready for a test run. We'll see what happens. So good luck on your project, and thanks for watching.